March 11th, 2026. In a Washington ballroom, President Trump declares a decisive victory. Over the past 11 days, he says, our military has virtually destroyed Iran. But at that exact moment, halfway around the world, a single retaliatory move is made. For the first time in history, Iranian officials announced the Strait of Hormuz, one of the planet's most vital economic arteries, is closed. A victory speech can fill a room with confidence, but supply chains do not listen to speeches. They respond to blockades. And as one leader claimed victory, a silent economic countdown began. A countdown that would reach across our own border and force us to ask why we are paying the price for decisions made elsewhere. Because for one single material, essential to everything we build, the world now had just 30 days. That material is aluminum. And as of that announcement from Tehran, every single ton of it scheduled to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, bound for the United States, stopped dead in the water. Within minutes, logistics teams and procurement chiefs across North America were staring at the same line on their screens, pull the inventory report, hit refresh. Again, how much do we have on hand? The answer came back fast, and it was worse than anyone wanted to admit. 30 days, American industry was running on a 1-month stockpile of aluminum. For Canadian auto, aerospace, and construction firms welded into those U.S. supply chains. That wasn't a neighbor's problem. It was the lead time before their own lines started grinding to a halt. The January 26 manufacturing data had already flagged this. The Institute for Supply Management's Customer Inventories Index had cratered to 38.7%, the thinnest cushion since 2022. After years of protectionist tariffs, companies rewired their supply lines to dodge duties, leaning on just-in-time imports and keeping almost no spare metal on the shelves. A 2025 Deloitte report spelled it out. Those tariff-distorted chains left manufacturers without buffer stocks, primed for exactly this kind of geopolitical shock. The 30-day clock wasn't a projection. It was a hard limit baked into the system. Yet even that 30-day window understates the real danger. Aluminum production comes with a brutal physical constraint. A smelter is not something you flick off on Friday and restart on Monday. Once those high amperage lines go cold, once the molten metal solidifies, the restart isn't a reset button. It's a reconstruction project that takes 6 to 12 months. The Hormuz shutdown, hitting a system already stripped of slack, pushes operators toward that edge. As imported metal disappears and factories start rationing orders, smelter owners face an ugly choice. Run into shortages and red ink, or bank their lines to stop the bleeding. The moment they let those pots go cold, that 6 to 12 month penalty locks in. Put those numbers side by side, a 30-day supply on one hand, a potential 1-year restart penalty on the other. It's an hourglass with just enough sand to last a month, sitting next to a calendar with 12 pages crossed out in red. In real life, that means auto plants idled, housing projects frozen mid-frame, machine shops from Ontario to Ohio, sending workers home with no clear return date. A decision made half a world away had just become a fixed countdown for the integrated North American economy, including Canadian governments now asking how much of this they could cushion and how much they were simply going to absorb. Data, timelines, industrial mechanics, they don't bleed or panic. People do. As the reality of that 30-day limit and that 1-year penalty moved from classified briefings into corporate war rooms and cabinet offices in Washington and Ottawa, the first responses were measured. Emergency calls, jumpy markets, procurement teams firing off rushed purchase orders. Then that controlled urgency tipped into a scramble for every last bar of aluminum in North America. The strategic game was over. A street fight was about to begin. That fight doesn't happen in a back alley. It happens over the phone. Across the United States, in thousands of procurement offices, the number 30 days has turned into a countdown clock on the wall. Everyone in the rooms knows what it means. If a smelter or casting line goes cold, you don't restart it next week. You could be down for a year. The sound of that clock ticking is the incessant ring of the telephone. Take one procurement manager in Michigan, call him Mark. He's on his third coffee, headset fused to his ear. Every polite no tightens his jaw. He isn't just calling his usual suppliers. He's calling their competitors, traders he hasn't spoken to in years. Anyone, anywhere, who might have a single ingot of aluminum to spare because he knows every failed call is one less day before a production line stops. The tone isn't negotiation anymore. It's pleading. Now zoom out to the boardroom of that same company. No one is looking at stock tickers or market reports. Every eye is fixed on a large wall calendar where a date 4 weeks from now is circled in thick red marker. The reality is stark. Production lines are watching the calendar instead of the headlines. Voices overlap as operations and sales fight over which contracts to sacrifice. Spreadsheets slide as they reshuffle production, cancel overtime that would burn through metal, and decide which customers will be told, "We just can't deliver." And down on the factory floor, the men and women who make things feel the shift as supervisors step away for hurried meetings and come back with clipped instructions. A machine that usually runs non-stop sits idle for maintenance longer than usual, and workers glance at each other. They look at the machines that are the source of their livelihoods and imagine a different sound, the profound, deafening silence of a factory that has gone dark. Across the country, procurement teams burn through contact lists, calling in every favor, knowing each unanswered email or curt rejection nudges another plant closer to shutting down a line. Most of those calls are desperate long shots, except for one. There should be one obvious call, the sure thing, the call to a partner woven into the same cross-border supply chains, just across the border with steady access to aluminum. So here's the question that hangs in those boardrooms, the ghost at the feast. In a crisis of this magnitude, why was Canada the one call they couldn't make? That question, the ghost at the feast, why couldn't they call Canada? The answer isn't found in the panic of the present moment. It's older than the crisis itself, buried in a decision made over a year earlier when the world was, for all intents and purposes, still at peace. For decades, the commercial relationship between the US and Canada wasn't just a stack of trade agreements. It behaved like a single system. On a map, you'd draw thick bands of value moving north and south. Raw materials and finished goods crossing the border so routinely that for a lot of industries, that border was just a thin line of ink, and at the center of those flows was aluminum. Canadian smelters fed American factories day after day. A dependable, nearby stream of metal that had become the default, the definition of a secure supply chain. Then, about 18 months before our 30-day clock started, the map changed with one stroke. A 50% tariff was placed on imported metals, Canada included. On paper, it was about protection, building a fortress around American industry. In practice, that stamp on the border quietly rewired the whole continent's economic nervous system. In boardrooms in Montreal and Vancouver, and in smaller industrial towns most Americans never think about, the response wasn't emotional, it was spreadsheet driven. When your closest customer suddenly comes with a 50% penalty attached, and buyers in Europe are offering solid prices without that kind of surcharge, the choice stops being a choice. Over the next year, capacity was shifted. Contracts were renegotiated. Long-standing supply lines were slowly pointed away from the tariff wall and toward higher return European markets. From Canada's side of the border, it felt less like turning our back on the US and more like learning, the hard way, that we could no longer afford to rely on one neighbor's policy mood for our economic survival. So when the shock hit and American executives finally reached for the old reflex, just call Canada, those frantic calls absolutely went out. Phones rang in those same Montreal and Vancouver offices. But what they ran into wasn't bitterness or triumph. It was the physics of an industry that had already moved on. Production runs were booked months in advance. Smelters were operating at steady capacity under signed contracts. Shipments of Canadian aluminum were literally at sea, committed to European buyers. You don't tear up a year's worth of obligations overnight, even for a neighbor, without blowing up your own credibility and balance sheet. The old aluminum lifeline to the U.S. didn't vanish in a single day. It had been methodically rerouted in slow motion. Ton by ton, shipment by shipment, the thick bands on that map running south grew thinner, while new ones arced across the Atlantic. Metal that would once have ended up stamped into car bodies in North American plants was now locked into production schedules in Europe. By the time the crisis erupted, the business hadn't just gone elsewhere, it was contractually and physically tied elsewhere. And here lies the brutal irony. The very policy designed as a shield for American industry had quietly dismantled its most reliable failsafe. For decades, the unwritten backup plan in any disruption was simple. If things go sideways, lean on Canada. By slamming a 50% tariff on that relationship, they had surgically removed the option that now mattered most. When the call finally came, why not just buy from Canada? The answer was unforgiving, because a year earlier they had priced that emergency phone number out of existence. With the physical supply chain effectively broken, the crisis left the panicked boardrooms and moved into the corridors of power. The last hope was no longer a purchase order. It was a diplomatic cable. Maybe governments could carve out an exception, suspend a rule, bend the system just enough to keep the continent running. But the replies that would come back weren't just bad news about metal. They were wrapped in legal language, political calculations, and national security justifications that closed the door even tighter. The attempt to fix this with diplomacy was about to reveal a second, even stranger failure. This time not of markets, but of institutions. And that transmission from another reality, it arrived. Not through a single crackling diplomatic cable, but across every news channel at once. It felt like watching a split screen of two separate worlds, each speaking as if the other simply wasn't there. On one side of the screen, Washington, D.C., a State Department official at a polished podium. With the industrial workaround already shut down by Washington's own tariff rules, that podium is now the last remaining safety valve. He talks about constructive channels and confirms that a 15-point ceasefire proposal is being passed to Tehran through intermediaries in Pakistan. Lower thirds on BBC World echo the same frame. U.S. offers peace plan. The Wall Street Journal homepage lights up with a path to de-escalation headline. Then the frame cuts to Tehran. Iranian military spokesman Ibrahim Zulfikari stands at a podium, flags behind him, the Fars News logo in the corner. Asked about the same 15-point plan, he doesn't just deny it, he smiles. The English subtitles under his Farsi answers carry a sneer as he mocks the American story, insisting he has no knowledge of any talks at all. One half of the world is reporting progress. The other half is laughing at the idea anything is happening. Washington isn't negotiating with an adversary, it's talking to itself. While those press conferences loop on TV, the real system keeps moving. In the same hour, those constructive channels, clips run, live ticker updates flag Israeli airstrikes reported near Tehran, followed by alerts of Iranian missile launches in response. Pentagon Pool reports no elements of the U.S. 82nd Airborne Division wheels up for the region. The public script says talks. The operational data says escalation. The diplomatic safety net everyone was counting on? It isn't there. That mismatch confirmed the most unsettling fact of the crisis. There would be no quick, elegant fix. Once military moves, political narratives, and supply chains all point in the same direction, systems stop turning on goodwill and start turning on momentum. This one had crossed that line. The crisis was now set to run, not to resolve. And that ticking clock, the one counting down the 30 days of aluminum supply, stops being an abstract metric. It is no longer a problem for a CEO in a boardroom or a general in a command center. With every diplomatic door now effectively closed, that countdown is aimed straight at our lives, at Canadian factories, construction sites, energy systems, the economy that shows up as prices and jobs at the kitchen table. The question is no longer whether the shock wave will hit, but which part of our system breaks first when it does. The clock hits zero, and the question we were left with, what breaks first, gets its answer. It isn't a single part of the system that cracks. It's the entire illusion of predictability. The abstract problem for economists and diplomats vaporizes and rematerializes as a concrete weight on the Canadian kitchen table. A car financing estimate suddenly circled in red. A grocery receipt spread out beside the mortgage statement. A credit card minimum that no longer looks manageable. Because with Hormuz choked off, tariffs already walling off Canadian aluminum from its main market, and no diplomatic carve-outs to ease the shock, all those manageable shortages and price spikes we've been tracking on charts finally converge in the one place nobody can hedge or outsource, the household budget. As one analyst put it at the time, the clock is no longer something in the background. It is front and center, ticking through every factory floor, every supply contract, and every decision being made behind closed doors. Remember that Deloitte analysis from before? The one that projected the tariffs alone would shave about 1% off the disposable income of an average household in 2026. That was the baseline damage, the slow squeeze we had already grudgingly priced in. A quiet haircut on what families had left after taxes, after rent or the mortgage, after the non-negotiables. But the crisis in Hormuz wasn't a slow squeeze. It was an accelerant poured onto a fire we ourselves had set. Those tariffs had already made aluminum more expensive and harder to move. The shipping choke point turned that vulnerability into a full-blown shortage. The chain reaction had reached its final link. You. On screen, the price tag of a new family car begins to spin, the numbers climbing uncontrollably. Then a new refrigerator, the kind you don't buy because you want an upgrade, but because the old one has finally died. The price blurs, rising faster than you can read it. Even a simple 12-pack of soda, its aluminum cans, now a precious commodity, sees its cost flicker and jump. Cut to a dealership outside Toronto. A young couple sits across from the salesperson, a toddler asleep in a stroller beside them. The salesperson turns the monitor around. The same model they test drove last year now carries a monthly payment that's jumped by almost $100. Their eyes go to each other, not the screen. One of them quietly says, "We can't do that." The pen that was supposed to sign the paperwork just taps against the brochure, then drops back onto the table. Cut to a grocery aisle in Calgary. A parent stands in front of the drink section, comparing the old sale price on the shelf tag to the new one on the scanner. The difference isn't dramatic on its own, but it's one more bump on top of everything else. The hand that reached for the 12-pack of cans pulls back. They grab a smaller pack, or a store brand, or nothing at all. Cut to an actual kitchen table in Hamilton. A stack of bills, a laptop open to an online cart with a replacement fridge sitting in it. Total due highlighted. Someone scrolls, deletes the extended warranty, switches to a cheaper model, looks at the monthly budget they've laid out in a spreadsheet beside it. There isn't enough room. The cursor hovers over the place order button, then moves up to save for later. The order disappears. The old, unreliable fridge gets a reprieve it doesn't deserve because the numbers just won't stretch. This isn't a stock market ticker. This is the direct translation of a geopolitical crisis and a policy blunder into the language of your household budget. It's no longer a line item on a corporate spreadsheet. It's the car you can no longer justify, the appliance you can't replace, the brand you stop buying not because you want to, but because the math has turned against you. And this wasn't some unforeseen black swan event. The groundwork for this exact failure was laid years earlier. Back in 2025, a similar tariff situation gave us a preview. It caused a 9% spike in building material costs. It added $22 million to a single $375 million healthcare project. That wasn't an academic warning. That was a real hospital in a real community, suddenly costing tens of millions more for the same bricks, the same beams, the same aluminum frames. We have already seen what happens when the system is deliberately weakened. When you strip away redundancy and treat crucial materials like bargaining chips instead of an infrastructure. We just didn't believe it would break this badly, this fast. Now, with Hormuz closed and tariffs still in place, the system isn't straining. It's at its breaking point. The question is no longer if the damage will happen, but just how severe the bill will be for ordinary families and how many corners they'll be forced to cut before something gives. This is the moment a global crisis lands on the kitchen table. How have you already felt the ripple effects of distant events on your own budget? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story is part of this larger story. Watching all this unfold, the conclusion seems obvious, doesn't it? The tariffs, the policy that made Canada's aluminum unwelcome in the US market, were a catastrophic, self-inflicted wound. They turned a resilient continental supply chain into something brittle and exposed, more dependent on fewer routes, carrying thinner inventories, and with almost no slack when a key choke point like Hormuz seized up. And that is true. But it is not the whole truth, because here is the central, baffling paradox of this entire crisis. While that very same policy was crippling consumers and industries south of the border, it was quietly making Canadian aluminum producers richer and stronger than ever before. So how is that possible? The answer lies in the data, a story that runs directly counter to the prevailing narrative. If the tariffs were truly the primary cause of the crisis, you would expect Canadian industry to have been crippled alongside its American counterpart. Instead, something very different happened. According to Statistics Canada, during the tariff period from 2017 to 2019, affected Canadian aluminum exporters didn't just survive, they invested. They increased their capital investments by approximately 60%. RBC Economics found a similar pattern. Employment in Canadian steel and aluminum actually rose, first by 4% and then by an additional 6% in the subsequent year. This is not the portrait of an industry on its knees. It's the image of an industry adapting and strengthening. So here's the puzzle. If tariffs were supposed to be the fatal blow, why did Canadian producers respond by investing more and hiring more? That contradiction tells us the headline villain is not the whole story. But wait. If you stop there, you miss the real story. The tariffs were a shock to the system, yes, but more like a stress test than a killing blow. The global structure was already full of hairline fractures. The true vulnerability, the one that will shape Canada's economy for the next decade, was hiding in plain sight. It had little to do with Washington's policies and everything to do with a single fragile shipping lane. Look at the architecture of the global aluminum market. A critical 9% of the world's entire output originates from smelters in the Middle East. These facilities are powered almost exclusively by oil and natural gas, tying their operational stability directly to the volatile politics of global energy. And every single ton of that metal, destined for markets across the world, had to pass through one specific point on the map, the Strait of Hormuz. When that choke point closed, it did more than interrupt a few shipments. It abruptly removed a major energy-dependent source of supply from the global system. Buyers who relied on that metal had to scramble, bidding up whatever aluminum they could still count on from producers who remained online and deliverable. That single event is what caused the London Metal Exchange price to spike to a 4-year high of $3,145 per ton. Tariffs had added pressure to the system, but the closure of Hormuz was the moment the weakest link snapped. Now set that fragile model beside the one in Quebec and British Columbia. Those smelters are powered not by a gas field subject to geopolitical whims, but by the immense stable, and predictable force of Canadian hydroelectric power. Their output does not rely on a single military choke point. It moves through secure, established trade corridors within North America and across the Atlantic. The crisis revealed that what many perceive as a simple commodity business is, in fact, a quiet source of strategic resilience. The tariffs were not the fatal blow. They were the stress test that exposed the underlying strength of Canada's position. The Hormuz closure was not just another headline crisis. It forced the world to reveal what it values most when things go wrong: reliable production, insulated from energy shocks, and narrow sea lanes. In a world increasingly shaken by energy volatility and fragile supply chains, Canada's domestic aluminum capacity is not a liability. It is an anchor for manufacturers who need predictable input costs, for governments designing industrial and energy policy, and for negotiators who need credible leverage in trade talks. Understanding the true nature of that anchor doesn't just explain the past crisis. It tells us how much room Canada actually has to maneuver in the next one. In the final chapter, we'll look at what it means to use that position deliberately, whether we simply brace for the next global disruption, or quietly turn this instability into a long-term Canadian advantage. That generational advantage unfolds in a two-act play for Canada's future. The first act is unavoidable, and we are living through it now, a painful short-term affordability crunch. As the Bank of Canada acknowledged in its March 2020 Stock 2026 outlook, disruptions of this magnitude inevitably create immediate cost pressures. In that same outlook, the bank also warned that these shocks will push global trade to restructure in favor of diversified, stable suppliers like Canada. That is the price of the crisis and the first glimpse of the opportunity. But this very pressure is accelerating the second act. It is forcing a global reevaluation, second-order deglobalization. When a single strait can bottleneck ships, insurers raise costs, cargo is delayed, and the lowest cost supplier quickly becomes the riskiest. That pushes governments to de-risk inputs and boards, to shorten and diversify supply chains toward jurisdictions with predictable rules and energy systems. You can already see the shift from pure efficiency to security and sustainability in Europe, where climate rules such as the carbon border adjustment mechanism and recent energy shocks make carbon-heavy metal shipped through Middle Eastern choke points less attractive than cleaner supply from reliable partners. The central question is no longer, where is it cheapest? It is, where is it safe, reliable, and clean? In this new world, Canada does have a structural advantage if it chooses to use it. Its low-carbon, hydro-powered aluminum lines up with what premium markets in North America and in Europe, with its incoming carbon border adjustment mechanism, are willing to pay for. A 2025 Eurasia Group report flagged that hydro-based transition as a key Canadian edge in a world of rising geopolitical risk. The shift is already visible. AL Circle and CRU report Canada redirecting billions in aluminum exports toward Europe and Mexico to meet growing demand for low-carbon metal from trusted suppliers. In response, Ottawa and companies like Rio Tinto are signing agreements to develop the world's greenest aluminum production. Policy and corporate strategy starting to move in the same direction. That edge still depends on choices we control: investment, permitting, and the infrastructure to move that metal reliably out of Canadian ports. Imagine a town built around an aluminum smelter in Quebec or British Columbia. In the first act of a shock like Hormuz, families there feel the same squeeze as everyone else. Higher prices at the pump, higher costs baked into everything, from cars to canned food. In the second act, those same plants become more valuable to automakers and builders that need secure, low-carbon inputs to keep selling into premium markets. That can translate into steadier orders, real capital projects, and local jobs tied to long-term supply contracts rather than another boom and bust cycle. The map of global trade we've known for 50 years is being redrawn as the old carbon-heavy shipping lanes from the Middle East start to fade. In their place, new routes solidify, green corridors linking Canada's industrial heartland directly to North America and Europe, with low-carbon aluminum as a central flow of strategic wealth. For Canadians, those corridors mean less exposure to flare-ups in distant straits, more predictable demand for domestic industry, and a public balance sheet less whiplashed by crisis-driven bailouts. Picture the next shock, whether another choke point crisis or a tighter CBAM. The first act is another spike in prices, but the second act is more buyers, investment, and long-term contracts being pulled toward Canada instead of away from it. This is the framework for the countdown we didn't see coming. It explains why distant events create short-term pain at home, but also how they reveal a clear path for Canada to secure its own trajectory. Understanding this is the first step to navigating the turbulent decade ahead. If this analysis gave you a new lens to view Canada's place in the world, subscribe for more stories that connect the global currents to our Canadian reality.